On the cold evening of April 14, 1865, as the Civil War's echoes still lingered in the shattered bones of the nation, President Abraham Lincoln settled into his seat at Ford's Theater, unaware that he was walking into the jaws of a conspiracy, so vast and tangled that even history itself would struggle to unravel it. While most remember that night as the tragic moment when John Wilkes Booth pulled the trigger, ending the life of America's 16th president, few understand the dark forces and hidden whispers that swirled behind the velvet curtains. Lincoln had enemies, not just Confederate sympathizers, but people within his own government who saw his vision for Reconstruction as a threat to their power, their legacy, and the fragile balance of America. That morning, Lincoln reportedly told his bodyguard that he had dreamt of a funeral in the White House, a chilling omen that some would later interpret as a subconscious glimpse into the events that were to follow. Booth, a well-known actor and Southern loyalist, was merely the hand that held the gun, but the mind behind the plot or minds remained cloaked in shadow. There were rumors of a secret cabal, military officers, Southern spies, and even members of Lincoln's own cabinet who feared his post-war policies. Diaries vanished, letters were burned, and witnesses silenced under the cloak of national unity. The official narrative declared Booth a lone assassin, hunted like an animal and shot in a barn just days later, but questions haunted those who had seen too much. Why did Secretary of War Edwin Stanton take control of the investigation and withhold key evidence? Why were witnesses who spoke of more conspirators never called to testify? Why did pages from Booth's diary, including those dated after his supposed death, mysteriously disappear? Some believe Lincoln was targeted not for revenge, but to stop the reconstruction of a new America where former slaves could rise and war profiteers would fall. The death of Lincoln did not end the war. It ignited a darker one in the shadows of American politics. The whispers never died. The Ford Theater stage, once a place for Shakespearean drama, became the setting of a national tragedy, a drama written in blood and sealed in secrets. And as the years passed, and monuments rose, so did the lies. This wasn't just the story of a man killed in a theater, it was the silencing of a vision, the erasure of a revolution, and the birth of an enduring American myth. Behind the smiling photos and marble statues lies a corpse buried under questions that history has yet to answer. What if Booth wasn't acting alone? What if he was the puppet, and the strings led to rooms far grander and darker than we imagined? If you look closely at the timeline, things don't add up. Booth crossed the Navy Yard Bridge without challenge, despite orders that no one be allowed to pass. Why? Who let him escape? And why did Booth have a ciphered note in his possession that matched codes used by Confederate spies and Union officials alike? As the manhunt raged, Booth's diary was conveniently recovered with 18 missing pages. Some of those who read the diary before it was altered claimed it named of men still in Washington, and in the days following Lincoln's death, a wave of strange events swept the Capitol. Documents disappeared, witnesses were arrested without charge, and Stanton declared martial law. The trial that followed was swift, with 4 conspirators hanged, but many said the true masterminds never stood before a judge. Mary Surratt, the first woman executed by the US government, proclaimed her innocence with her last breath, but her boarding house had hosted meetings of powerful men, and perhaps that was enough. As America tried to move on, those who knew the truth either vanished or stayed silent. One detective investigating the case turned up dead in the Potomac. A soldier guarding evidence died of mysterious causes. The message was clear: let sleeping ghosts lie. But history has a way of stirring them. Lincoln's assassination was more than a killing, it was a coup veiled in patriotism. The very fabric of the Union was rewoven that night, not with ink, but with blood and fire. What really happened at Ford's Theater? We may never know every secret, but the next time you see Lincoln's solemn face on a penny, ask yourself what truths were bought with his blood, and who still profits from the silence. But what if that silence had been forced by fear? In the years following Lincoln's death, whispers emerged of shadowy meetings held in candlelit basements beneath Washington. Men in black coats passed sealed envelopes under tables, exchanged nods heavy with unspeakable knowledge. Some of these figures, insiders claimed, were men Lincoln had once trusted, advisors who had walked the halls of the White House, smiled in public, and plotted in private. One account from a Union officer, hidden in a personal journal and discovered years later, described overhearing a hushed conversation. He must not live to see his dream realized. One voice said, "Let the actor take the fall. History loves a good story." Even Booth's death was steeped in doubt. The man who was shot in the barn, was he truly Booth? Reports conflicted. Some claimed he begged for his life in a Southern accent. Booth never used a dentist. Later examined the body and questioned the dental records. Rumors spread that Booth had escaped, living out his years in exile under a false name in South America. An old man reportedly confessed on his deathbed in Brazil, claiming to be Booth, and even produced a diary with eerily familiar entries. The government, however, dismissed these accounts, but those who believe in the conspiracy point to one chilling fact. When Booth's body was buried, the government sealed the coffin with cement, forbidding exhumation. The emotional toll on Lincoln's family was equally devastating. Mary Todd Lincoln, already mentally fragile, spiraled into grief and paranoia. She claimed to hear whispers in the night, voices of men conspiring outside her bedroom window. Her letters, most now lost, hinted at knowledge, too dangerous to speak aloud. "They watch me still," she once wrote. "They do not mourn him, they feared him." And what of Lincoln himself? In his final weeks he had grown melancholic, some said prophetic. He spoke often of death, of unfinished work, of a burden too great to carry. One aide claimed Lincoln awoke from a nightmare just days before the assassination, his face pale and eyes wide. "I dreamt I walked into the East Room," he whispered, "and saw a coffin guarded by soldiers. I asked who had died. The president, they told me." This wasn't just a president murdered, it was a dream slain. Lincoln had envisioned a post-war America where healing came through unity, not punishment, where former slaves became citizens, and states found common ground. His vision threatened those who thrived in chaos. The war had made some men rich, beyond imagination: arms dealers, railroad barons, politicians who had grown addicted to power. A peaceful, equal union would end their reign. After Lincoln's death, those dreams crumbled. Reconstruction was hijacked. The South remained divided, and bitter, black Americans, momentarily promised freedom and equality, found themselves shackled by new chains of law and hatred. The men who benefited from war returned to their schemes, draping themselves in patriotism while bleeding the nation dry. Lincoln was gone, but the machinery of power rolled on, greased by secrets. Even now, more than a century and a half later, the shadows of that night stretch across America. History books speak in absolutes, but behind those neat sentences lie questions with no answers. Why were Lincoln's guards mysteriously absent that night? Why did it take hours to notify the city's full security detail? Why were certain witnesses relocated, their testimonies never recorded? And why did those closest to Lincoln suddenly distance themselves from the investigation? Perhaps because the truth is too dangerous. Perhaps because some myths are easier to accept than the horror of betrayal from within. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln may not have been the end of the Civil War, but the beginning of another war fought in whispers, in locked drawers, in the dark corridors of power. The real question remains: was it justice, revenge, or fear that pulled the trigger? And if you dig deep enough, will the truth set you free, or bury you beside him?